of neurological disorders like ADHD, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, your first thought probably isn't gut inflammation, but maybe it should be. My name is Kendra Hann, fitness and nutrition specialist, here today with Jamie Woodle, integrative nutrition health coach and master of health science education. Neurological conditions impact 43% of the world's population, surpassing cardiovascular disease as the top contributor of disease worldwide. Jamie, what exactly are neurological conditions?
Well, Kendra, neurological conditions include diseases and disorders of the brain, the spinal column, and the nerves. And these neurological disorders include things that are more immediately life-threatening, such as stroke or meningitis. But they can also be the debilitating, more long-term or chronic issues, such as chronic migraines or epilepsy, sleep disorders, or traumatic brain injuries. This also includes the more nefarious ones, including the neurodegenerative diseases such as MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even Huntington's disease.
Now, I know there are a lot of factors that come into play and contribute to these neurological disorders. So some of those are controllable, vitamin deficiencies, lifestyle choices, injuries at times, and others aren't, like genetic predisposition or congenital abnormalities.
That's absolutely right. Another thing we don't often consider is exposure to things like viruses and parasites. So for example, they're finding that exposure to something like the Epstein-Barr virus could play a part in contributing to the triggering of things like Parkinson's disease.
And how does inflammation contribute to that?
Well, they're really finding that it is inflammation that is working as the main driver triggering these diseases and not like just genetics. So for years they talked about it's genetics. Well, newer research is finding that it's actually inflammation that could be pulling the trigger on some of these preloaded genetics in our bodies. So the inflammation creates this oxidative stress which damages the cells, and then they begin to dysfunction. Even more interesting is that international researchers have recently correlated your gut microbiome with the development of these debilitating diseases. So specifically, they're finding that people who have Huntington's, MS, Parkinson's, they're lacking a specific type of microbe that produces something called short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids are naturally anti-inflammatory. A couple of examples of these short-chain fatty acids include acetate and butyrate. And with these naturally occurring anti-inflammatory metabolites in our bodies, it helps reduce overall inflammation. So when they test the stool of people who do not have these diseases against the people who have developed them, that seems to be the missing link. And I know inflammation plays a huge role in the development of Alzheimer's as well, in a very complex way that we won't get into today. But there is some research that is coming out that shows Alzheimer's might also, in the future, possibly be classified as a type 3 diabetes. So I'm looking forward to see where science goes with that. And actually, Kendra, I know we've talked about it before, but my father, we think, also has Alzheimer's. My father is 95, and he has progressed so quickly that he is now combative, and they cannot get him to do the MRI scans and the other testing that is required to officially be diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But he has absolute memory loss, and he is going down the pathway and is now in hospice from what we believe to probably be Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Well, there's so many people today that are impacted by Alzheimer's. When I worked in residential care facilities as a much younger lady than I am now, that was one of the most consistent diagnoses that I interacted with, and actually eventually was transferred to an Alzheimer's unit that was completely full, not a single bed open. So I'm also excited to see this new research and how our treatments of Alzheimer's will adapt to that in the future. Strokes are caused by an inflammation that impacts the integrity of the vascular wall. Those plaques, just like with cardiovascular issues, are applied to those vascular walls to try and act as a Band-Aid or a scab and encourage healing. Unfortunately, over time, these can build up and create blockages, which then lead to a stroke.
Researchers are now finding that people who suffer with chronic migraines and cluster headaches are testing significantly higher for inflammatory markers on blood tests. So they know that the inflammation plays a huge role. Even something like fibromyalgia, which for years was considered a psychological disorder, because when these people would come in and they would complain about the pain, well, they would do imaging and testing and they could not find any cause of the pain. So they really thought it was a psychosomatic issue and they sent them to therapists and psychologists to get help.
How frustrating that must have been for those people.
Yeah, so newer research is showing that it's actually neuroinflammation, not a psychosomatic disorder, that is causing this feeling of pain. Additionally, it could be possible that fibromyalgia may be an autoimmune disorder where the body is attacking the neurological pathways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see how they would draw those conclusions.
So how does this happen? That is where research is now. In addition to trying to figure out how to help, we got to know what is triggering things like fibromyalgia. Well, it's still very preliminary, but they think there could be something with the blood-brain barrier as well as leaky gut. So Kendra, I don't know if you've ever suffered with insomnia. I definitely have suffered from insomnia. Well, they're finding that it can be attributed to a cycle of inflammation.
Oh.
So this inflammation begins in the gut with chronic gut inflammation, and your body, as magnificent as it is, tries to battle this or to fight it by producing extra cortisol. Well, the problem is that excess cortisol actually makes it so that your body cannot effectively use the melatonin that it produces to make you sleepy and want to go to sleep. And to make matters worse, this sleep deprivation causes horrible changes to your microbiome and produces additional inflammation and oxidative stress, which we know causes cellular dysfunction and leads to chronic diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and MS. So my experience with insomnia early on in my health journey, I had a problem where I couldn't fall asleep. I would lay down in bed and I would feel sleepy. And every time I almost fell asleep, my body acted like, have you ever experienced when you're dreaming and you fall like jolt awake before you hit the ground? That jolt is what I would experience. I would almost fall asleep and jolt and almost fall asleep and jolt. And my nervous system would not let me sleep. Well, as soon as I found out that I was having a lot of low-grade inflammation, a lot of gut inflammation, and I began the steps to heal my gut and reduce the inflammation, that went away, actually within about a few weeks.
So what other strategies have you adopted or enacted in your life to try to deter some of those negative neurological issues?
I did the 4 R's of gut health. I checked for food sensitivities and nutritional deficiencies. I began eating things like fermented mushrooms, which we have at edensessentials.com, to get extra pre and probiotics in my system.
It's important to note with all of our fermented products that you never want to put those powders into anything that is warmer than room temperature. This is going to preserve the health of those bacteria that are within the fermented mushrooms, beets, and turmeric that we have available at edensessentials.com.
So in addition to the fermented foods, I also began looking into probiotics, and I found some very interesting research that I want to share with you today about what microbes you might check to see are in your probiotics. These are specific strains that produce those short-chain fatty acids that have natural anti-inflammatory metabolites, or these bacteria produce natural anti-inflammatory metabolites called short-chain fatty acids. And I'm going to list those microbes: Lactobacillus plantarum, Lactobacillus paracasi, and Lactobacillus ramus.
In addition to everything we've discussed already, I do want to reiterate that lifestyle choices have a big part to play when it comes to these issues as well. So things like not smoking.
Oh, yeah.
That can help. Adjusting your diet. Making sure that you're eating the rainbow, that you're feeding those bacteroides and not as much those firmicutes that love those sugars and love those seed oils, those fried foods and sugary snacks.
Yeah.
And exercise. And again, when I suggest exercise, I'm not saying prepare for a 5K or run a marathon. I'm saying small incremental changes that you can enact into your life to help support your well-being. Going for a walk with your friend, maybe sitting out in the sunshine for a little bit and absorbing some of that vitamin D. One consistent thing we keep finding in our research and have tried conveying is the absolute vital importance of your gut microbiome and how not prioritizing your gut health can eventually lead to more debilitating, sometimes life-ending consequences. We're out of time, but that doesn't mean we're done hearing from you. Follow us on social media with Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also send us an email at info@edensessentials.com with any comments or specific topics you may want to hear us discuss. Thanks again for sharing this time with us on Return to Eden, and we hope you have a blessed day.